She destroyed 17 of my mailboxes, so I gave her one. She'll never forget my security camera. Captured it, all the white Lexus with plate Queen K backing over my property while the driver laughed. Our HOA president had been terrorizing my family for 6 months, thinking she could force us out, but mailbox number 18 would be different. What happened next was completely legal, absolutely brilliant, and left her precious Lexus in a condition that made the entire neighborhood gasp. By the end of the day, the woman who'd made our lives hell was on her knees in my driveway, begging. This is the story of how a simple mailbox ended the reign of the most psychotic HOA president ever. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment the first time I met. Karen Thompson. She was wearing her signature beige blazer with a sparkling HOA president pin that caught the Texas sun like a warning beacon. She didn't walk up to our driveway. She marched clipboard in hand, examining our moving truck like it was evidence in a crime scene. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she said, though her tone suggested we were anything but welcome. "I'm Karen Thompson, HOA president for the past 5 years. I like to personally inspect all new residents to ensure they understand our community standards." Emma, only 12, but already wise beyond her years, whispered to me, "Dad, why is she looking at our boxes like that?" I squeezed her shoulder gently, trying to project calm. I didn't feel Heron spent the next 30 minutes going through a list of HOA regulations that seemed to cover everything from the acceptable height of grass to 5 in not a millimeter, more to the approved colors for front doors. 16 shades of beige and brown, nothing garish. When she got to our house's exterior, paint a perfectly reasonable light tan, she frowned. "This color is technically within regulations," she said, emphasizing technically like it was a dirty word, "but it's not what I would call sophisticated. You might want to consider repainting to something more appropriate." I bit my tongue, remembering my late wife's advice about choosing battles. "Wisely, thank you for the input, ma'am. We'll keep that in mind," I said, using my old Marine Corps training to keep my voice neutral and respectful. That's when things took a turn. As she was leaving, Karen paused at the edge of our driveway, looked me up and down, and smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know, Daniel, may I call you Daniel? I host a weekly dinner for select members of our community tomorrow night. 7 sharp. I'd love to have you join us, just you, of course. These dinners aren't really suitable for children." The way she said it, the way her eyes lingered, made her intentions crystal clear. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Thompson, but I need to focus on getting Emma settled in school starts next week, and there's still so much unpacking to do." Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. "I see. Well, the invitation stands if you change your mind, though I should mention it's quite beneficial to stay on good terms with the HOA president in this neighborhood." The next morning, I was in the kitchen making Emma's favorite chocolate chip pancakes when we heard a tremendous crash from the front yard. Emma ran to the window first. "Dad, someone just hit our mailbox." I rushed outside to find our brand new mailbox split clean in half, mail scattered across the lawn like confetti, and there, barely 50 ft down the road, was Karen's white Lexus brake lights glowing as she watched us in her rearview mirror. When her eyes met through her mirror, I swear I saw her smile. Emma gathered up the scattered mail, her hands shaking slightly. "Dad, do you think she did that on purpose?" I wanted to lie, to protect her from the pettiness of adults, but Emma had already seen too much loss to be sheltered from life's smaller cruelties. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe it was an accident, but I knew it wasn't." As I installed our second mailbox that afternoon, our neighbor from across the street wandered over Rachel Martinez, a lawyer in her mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a knowing smile, watched me work. "Let me guess," she said, "you turned down Karen's dinner invitation." When I nodded, she shook her head sympathetically. "Yeah, that'll do it. You're not the first, won't be the last. The Hendersons before you, they lasted 3 months. The Washingtons before them. 6 weeks. Karen doesn't handle rejection well." She glanced around, as if Karen might be listening, then lowered her voice. "Word of advice. Document everything. Trust me on this one." Before I could ask what she meant, she was already walking back to her house, leaving me with a growing sense of unease that night as I tucked Emma into bed. She asked me something that broke my heart. "Dad, are we going to be okay here? I mean, really okay?" I sat on the edge of her bed, remembering how her mother used to do the same thing, and tried to find the right words, what your mum always said about bullies. Emma nodded, reciting the familiar words. "They're just broken." "People trying to break others?" "That's right," I said. "And we don't let broken people break us, do we?" She shook her head firmly, and I kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep, kiddo. Tomorrow's a new day." But as I stood up to leave, I found something tucked under my windshield wiper, a note in neat, precise handwriting. "This is just the beginning. Soldier boy, my blood ran cold. How did she know about my military service? And more importantly, what exactly was she planning?" I thought Karen's message was just an empty threat, until mailbox number 2 met its demise. 3 days later this time, she didn't even pretend it was accidental. My security camera caught her, backing up 3 times to get the perfect angle before her Lexus's bumper connected with the post. When I went to the police with the footage, the officer, a tired L-looking man who had clearly dealt with Karen before, just sighed, "Property damage. Under $500 is a civil matter. Mr. Brooks, you can file a complaint with the HOA." When I pointed out that Karen was the HOA, he actually laughed. "Welcome to Willowbrook, buddy. My advice, just keep replacing them. She'll get bored eventually." But Karen Thompson didn't get bored, if anything. She got creative. The morning after my police visit, I found a new notice taped to my door, a $50 fine for attempting to involve outside authorities in internal HOA matters. I couldn't believe there was actually a rule for that, but Rachel confirmed it existed, buried on page 97 of the HOA handbook that Karen had personally authored. Mailbox number 3 fell to a delivery truck that mysteriously veered off course, though the driver seemed suspiciously familiar with Karen when I saw them chatting afterward. Number 4 met its end when the HOA's lawn service lost control of their commercial mower by the time we reached mailbox number 5. Even 12-year-old Emma had developed a dark sense of humor about it. "Hey, Dad," she said one morning, "maybe we should just put wheels on the next one, save Karen the trouble." But the joking couldn't hide the impact this was having on her kids at school. Had started asking why we never had a mailbox, and I could see the embarrassment in her eyes when she had to explain the breaking point came with mailbox number 7 through 10, all destroyed in a single week. The security footage from that week looked like a highlight reel of vehicular mayhem, each destruction more elaborate than the last, like Karen was putting on a performance for an audience of 1. Karen had escalated to drive by hits at 6 out in the morning, the crash of metal on metal becoming our unwanted alarm clock. Each time brought a new excuse. When confronted, there was a dog in the road. A bee flew in my window. My foot slipped on the accelerator. The excuses were so absurd that they felt like deliberate insults to our intelligence, but the mailbox destruction was just the opening salvo in Karen's war. The HOA fines started rolling in like clockwork. $200 for grass that measured 2.7 instead of 2.5, $150 for placing our garbage cans out at 5:59 p.m. instead of 6 p.m., exactly $300 for my truck, being parked 1.2 inches over the property line. She even fined me $75 for the unauthorized security camera installation that had recorded her crimes. When I pointed out the camera was on my property, she produced a rule about devices that might record common areas that was so vaguely worded it could apply to someone looking out their window. By month 2, I owed nearly $3,000 in fines for violations so petty they would have been funny if they weren't bleeding. My savings dry. Rachel tried to help, reviewing each fine notice with her lawyer's eye, but Karen had been careful. She's technically within the HOA bylaws, Rachel explained over coffee one afternoon, even if she's enforcing rules that haven't been used since 1987. See this one about the angle of your porch light, that regulation was meant for the old gas lamps, but because it was never officially removed, she trailed off, seeing my frustration. The game is rigged. Daniel. Karen wrote half these rules herself. The psychological warfare was taking its toll, especially on Emma. She'd started checking the front yard every morning with a mixture of hope and dread, and the disappointment in her eyes when she found another destroyed mailbox was getting harder to bear. One morning I found her putting her tooth fairy money in a jar labeled New Mailbox Fund, and my heart broke a little more. The mounted camera I'd installed captured it all in high definition. Karen's progression from accidental backing into our mailbox to full speed ramming attacks. Mailbox number 11 was special. Karen had apparently decided that subtlety was overrated and ploughed into it at 30 mph, sending the poor thing flying into Rachel's yard. Rachel kept the twisted remains as evidence, she said, though I suspected she was planning something. Number 12 through 15 fell in increasingly spectacular fashion. Karen graduated to recruiting others, a teenage boy in a lifted truck, a woman in a minivan who looked suspiciously like Karen's hairdresser, even a golf cart from the country club that malfunctioned and veered across 3 yards to hit our mailbox. Specifically, the golf cart incident was particularly ridiculous. The driver claimed the steering locked up, but the security footage clearly showed him making 3 precise turns to line up the shot. When I confronted him, he actually apologized, admitting Karen had threatened to ban him from the club's poker night if the financial toll was adding up faster than my freelance welding jobs could cover 16 mailboxes at $200 each, plus installation costs, plus the endless HOA fines. We were pushing $5.00 in damages and penalties. But the moment that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning. Emma was waiting for the school bus backpack on her shoulders when Karen's Lexus came roaring down the street. Instead of slowing down like usual, she accelerated, smashing into mailbox number 16 with such force that pieces of it flew toward the bus stop. Emma jumped back, eyes wide with shock as metal and plastic rained down around her. The other kids at the bus stop stared in silence, and I saw something die in my daughter's eyes, not fear, but faith that adults were supposed to be better than this. The bus driver, a no-nonsense woman named Dolores, actually got out and gave Karen a piece of her mind. "You could have hurt these babies," she shouted. Karen just smiled that cold smile and drove away, leaving destruction and traumatized children in her wake. That night, Emma didn't cry, she didn't rage or throw things or demand we move. Instead, she sat at our kitchen table with her homework spread out in front of her and said something that lit a fire in my chest. "Dad, I've been thinking, what if we built a mailbox that couldn't be destroyed? I mean, you're a welder. I'm pretty good at math and science. What if we just solve this problem?" She pulled out graph paper and started sketching. "Look, if we sink the post deep enough, use the right materials, calculate the force distribution." She looked up at me with her mother's determination shining in her eyes. We can't let her win. Mum wouldn't let her win, and just like that, I knew we were done playing defense. Emma was right. It was time to fight back, but we'd do it our way, the smart way, the Brooks way. As she sketched out preliminary designs, I noticed she'd drawn little flowers around the edges of the mailbox, plans the same flowers her mother used to doodle for good luck. Emma explained when she caught me looking. And to remind us we're doing this for the right reasons, the garage became our war room over the next 2 weeks. Emma and I spent every evening after homework huddled over her laptop, researching materials and design principles. She'd inherited her mother's brilliant mind, and my stubborn streak, a dangerous combination when properly motivated. "Okay, Dad," she said one night, pushing her glasses up her nose in a gesture so like her mother, it made my chest tight. Based on the security footage, Karen's average impact speed is 25 mph, but she peaked at 40 on the last hit. If we assume the Lexus weighs about 400 lb, she pulled up a physics calculator on her computer, fingers flying over the keys. We need something that can withstand at least 36,000 lb of force to be completely safe. I watched my 12-year-old daughter calculate force distributions and material stress limits with the focus of an engineer, and felt both proud and sad that she had to use these skills for something like this. She'd even created a spreadsheet tracking every mailbox destruction, noting patterns in timing, approach angles, and impact force. "Look, Dad," she said, pointing at her data. "Karen always attacks between 6 and 7:30 a.m. on weekdays, but she waits until after 9 on weekends. She's a creature of habit. We can use that." Rachel started dropping by our garage sessions, always with some excuse. Returning a tool she'd borrowed, bringing over extra pizza, needing legal advice about property lines that she definitely already knew, but I appreciated the company, and Emma had taken to calling her Aunt Rachel with a knowing smile that suggested she saw right through our neighbor's pretenses. "You know," Rachel said one evening, watching Emma explain the benefits of triangular support structures, "I've been keeping tabs on our dear HOA president. Did you know she's been bullying the HOA for her car repairs? Every single mailbox hit charged to the community fund as neighborhood inspection vehicle maintenance. That's fraud, plain and simple." She pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, waiting for someone with the backbone to stand up to her looks. Like I found my champions." She spread the papers across our workbench, receipts, bank statements, HOA meeting minutes with suspicious alterations. "Look at this one," she said, pointing to a receipt, $3.00 for mailbox vehicle repairs just last month. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. The revelation about Karen's financial crimes added new urgency to our project. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about stopping a petty tyrant who'd been bleeding our community dry. But first, we had to survive her escalating attacks. Mailbox number 13 met its end via a rented U-Haul truck. The driver got confused. Karen claimed number 14 fell during a sudden rainstorm that provided convenient cover for Karen, sliding on wet roads. But number 15 was different. I watched from the window as Karen pulled up to our latest mailbox, reversed slowly, and gave it a tentative tap. When it didn't immediately fall over, I saw her face contort with rage in her rearview mirror. She backed up further and tried again, harder this time, still standing. That's when she made a mistake. She got out of her car to inspect the mailbox, not realizing I'd reinforced this one with a steel sleeve. The look of frustration on her face was almost worth the thousands of dollars we'd spent so far. Almost, she actually kicked the mailbox post, then limped back to her car, and I had to stifle a laugh. "Despite everything, she's getting desperate," Rachel observed, reviewing the footage with us. "Desperate people make mistakes that's good for us, but it also makes her dangerous." "Daniel, I need to tell you something." She glanced at Emma, who was pretending to focus on her homework, but clearly Listening 5 years ago when Karen first became HOA president, I made the mistake of planting roses in my front garden the wrong color. Apparently, she fined me $500, and when I fought it, she made my life hell for 6 months. Anonymous complaints to my law firm, mysterious damage to my car, my garbage cans constantly move to violate pickup rules. I gave up, paid the fine, pulled up the roses. I've regretted backing down ever since her hands clenched into fists. So whatever you're planning, count me. In its time, someone stood up to that woman. Emma looked up from her homework. Miss Rachel, what color were the roses? Rachel smiled, sadly pink. My grandmother's favorite color. She'd given me the bushes before she passed Emma's jaw, set in that determined way I knew so well. Then our mailbox needs pink flowers on it for your grandma and for everyone. Karen's hurt. Working on the indestructible mailbox became a family affair. Emma handled the calculations and design. I managed the construction, and Rachel provided legal coverage and strategic planning. But the project wasn't without setbacks. Our first attempt at the steel frame came out crooked. I'd been so focused on strength that I'd neglected precision. "It's okay, Dad," Emma said, patting my shoulder as we looked at the lopsided frame. "Mum always said the best things take a few tries." We started over, and this time Emma double-checked every measurement. The second frame was perfect. Rachel suggested adding a layer of rubber between the steel layers to absorb impact, and Emma immediately started researching shock absorption coefficients. Watching them work together, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my wife's death. Hope, not just hope that we'd win this battle with Karen, but hope that maybe, just maybe, we were building something more than a mailbox here. We were building a family, forged in the strangest circumstances but genuine. Nonetheless, one night as we were mixing concrete for the foundation, Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. "Dad, what if she just keeps going? What if she finds another way to hurt us?" After the mailbox, I set down my tools and really looked at my daughter, at the worry lines that no 12-year-old should have at the determined set of her jaw that was pure her mother. "Then we keep fighting," I said simply, not with anger or violence, but with intelligence and persistence. "That's what your mom would do." Emma nodded, then surprised me by saying, "I think Mom would like Rachel. She's smart and she makes you smile again." Before I could respond to that loaded observation, she'd already turned back to her laptop, pulling up specs for security cameras with night vision. "We should probably record everything," she said casually, "you know, for evidence." The next morning, mailbox number 16 lay in pieces on our lawn, but we just smiled. Karen had no idea what was coming. As we cleared away the debris, old Mr. Fredericks shuffled over with his cane. "You know," he said quietly, "my son's a contractor. If you need any help with special projects, just say the word. That woman fined me for having a bird feeder that attracted non-approved avian species. It's time someone taught her a lesson." The resistance was growing, and Karen's reign of terror was about to meet its match the morning we installed the ultimate mailbox. The entire neighborhood seemed to sense something momentous was happening. It was 5:30 a.m. on a Saturday, but curtains twitched and doors cracked open. As Emma and I wheeled our creation out of the garage, Rachel appeared with a thermos of coffee, and her camera appointed herself as our official documentarian. "This needs to be recorded for posterity," she said, with the mailbox itself was a thing of beauty, elegant in its simplicity, terrifying in its construction. From the outside, it looked like a slightly larger than normal black mailbox with decorative bronze details that Emma had insisted on. The bronze plate read the unstoppable in elegant script with smaller text. "Below smile, you're on camera." But beneath that innocent exterior lay an engineering marvel that would make a tank manufacturer proud. Emma had even added her touch. Small pink, Roses etched into the bronze a tribute to Rachel's destroyed garden and all of Karen's victims. The installation process took 3 hours and required equipment I'd borrowed from my construction buddy. First, we'd excavated a hole 5 ft deep and 3 ft wide. Emma had calculated the exact dimensions needed for maximum stability. The concrete foundation we poured contained enough rebar to build a small bridge. While that set, I explained the construction to Emma's video diary, which she'd started. Keeping for science class, though I suspected it was more for potential legal proceedings, the frame is 1. 5 in steel plating, I said. Unable to keep the pride out of my voice, the interior is filled with high-density concrete mixed with steel fibers for additional strength. The post itself extends 5 ft underground and is anchored to a foundation that weighs approximately 800 lb, Emma chimed in. With her own observations, we calculated that this design can withstand an impact from a 2-ton vehicle traveling at 50 mph without significant structural damage. Also, the LED lights are solar-powered and will illuminate anyone approaching within 10 ft. The cameras have night vision and automatically upload to cloud storage. We also added a secret feature, a small speaker that plays a warning chime. If someone approaches at high speed, it won't stop them, but it'll definitely surprise them. By the time we finished, a small crowd had gathered. Our elderly neighbor, Mr. Fredericks, brought out lawn chairs for the spectators. Someone had made popcorn. It felt like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable showdown. We didn't have to wait long. At exactly 700 A, and we heard the familiar purr of Karen's Lexus engine. The crowd grew silent as the white car appeared at the end of the street, moving with the predatory grace of a shark that had spotted prey through the kitchen window. I watched Karen's face as she noticed our new mailbox. Her expression cycled through confusion, anger, and then something like hunger. She drove past, once slowly examining it from all angles. The second pass was faster, and on the third, she stopped directly in front of it. I could see her through the windshield, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She was talking to herself, or maybe practicing what she'd say. After she'd destroyed our latest attempt at postal independence, I saw her lips moving, probably talking to herself, psyching herself up for what came next. Then she reversed down the street far enough to build up speed. "Dad," Emma whispered beside me, her hand finding mine. "What if it doesn't work?" "It'll work," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "And if it doesn't, we'll build a better one." But deep down, I knew this was our last shot. If this failed, we'd have to admit defeat, maybe even leave Willowbrook entirely. The thought of letting Karen win, of teaching Emma that bullies always triumph, made my stomach churn. So we watched and waited, the entire neighborhood holding its collective breath. Rachel stood on my other side, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in support. "Whatever happens," she said quietly, "you've already won." You stood up to her. You showed Emma what courage looks like. I appreciated the sentiment, but I really wanted our mailbox to survive what was coming. Aaron's back up. Lights went off for a moment. Nothing happened. Then we heard it. The roar of an engine being pushed to its limit. The Lexus shot forward like a white missile, accelerating past the usual harassment speed, past any pretense of accident or mistake. 40 mph of entitled rage aimed directly at our mailbox. The warning chime we'd installed went off, a pleasant ding-dong that seemed absurdly cheerful. Given the circumstance, several neighbors later told me that sound followed by what happened next was the funniest thing they'd ever witnessed. The impact was tremendous. The sound, a catastrophic bang that set off car alarms 3 houses away, was immediately followed by the scream of tortured metal and the explosive deployment of airbags. The crowd gasped in unison, then fell silent as the smoke began to clear, and there it stood, our mailbox, unmoved, unbroken, unbowed, a single scratch, maybe 2 centimeters long, marred the black paint where the Lexus had made contact. That was it. Emma had been right about the pink roses. They seemed to be smiling in the morning. Sun, the Lexus, on the other hand, looked like it had tried to fight a mountain and lost. The front end was crumpled beyond recognition. The hood folded up like an accordion, blocking any view through the windshield. Steam hissed from the ruptured radiator. Mixing with smoke from the engine compartment, various fluids created an abstract painting on the asphalt green: coolant, black oil, red transmission fluid. The front wheels splayed at impossible angles, the passenger side wheel completely separated. From the axle inside the car, Karen sat motionless, pinned by the airbag, her perfect makeup now streaked with tears and airbag powder. The silence was broken by someone, I think it was Mr. Fredericks, starting a slow clap. Soon the entire crowd was applauding, some even cheering Mailbox. "One Lex is 0, someone shouted, and nervous laughter rippled through the group. A teenager with their phone out yelled, "This is going online right now. This is better than any movie." Emma squeezed my hand so tight it hurt, but she was grinning wider than I'd seen in months. It worked. Dad, it actually worked. The mailman, who just pulled up for his morning route, stepped out of his truck and stared at the scene in shock. In 40 years of delivering mail, he said slowly, "I've never seen anything like this. That Mailbox just won a fight with a luxury car." He pulled out his phone, and within minutes the video was spreading across social media. Legendary Mailbox defeats, entitled "Karen would eventually get millions of views, but we didn't know that yet. All we knew was that we'd won this battle." Rachel was already on the phone with emergency services, her voice professionally calm, but unable to hide her satisfaction. The tow truck driver who eventually arrived took one look at the scene and whistled low. "Ma'am, your insurance is going to have some questions. This kind of damage from hitting a mailbox, that's going to be a hard sell." He examined the wreckage more closely. $28,000 minimum, maybe more. If the frame's bent, actually looking at this, yeah, the frame's definitely bent. Make that $35,000. Karen's response was predictable. That Mailbox jumped out in front of me. But this time, no one was buying it. The crowd actually laughed. Someone shouted, "Karen mailboxes don't jump, they don't have legs." Even the police officer who arrived to take the report had to turn away to hide his smile as the Lexus was loaded onto the flatbed. Karen made a phone call that we couldn't hear, but would soon learn about. She might have lost this battle, but Karen Thompson wasn't done with us yet. As the tow truck drove away with the remains of her Lexus, she stood on the sidewalk, still covered in airbag dust, and pointed at me. "This isn't over, Brooks. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. That thing is a public menace." Rachel stepped forward, her lawyer voice in full effect. "Actually, Karen, I think you'll find that Daniel's mailbox meets all federal postal regulations and HOA guidelines. I checked thoroughly. What it doesn't have to meet are the safety standards for being rammed by vehicles at 40 maybe pt. That's what we in the legal profession call assumption of risk." The crowd laughed again, and Karen stormed off, her beige blazer now grey with dust, her dignity in tatters. But I knew she was right about one thing: this wasn't over, not yet. The video of Karen's Lexus versus our mailbox went viral overnight, but instead of shaming her into backing down, it only made her more vicious. Within days, the whisper campaign began. Karen, unable to destroy our mailbox physically, decided to destroy our reputation instead. It started small comments at the grocery store about that. Violent ex-military man who endangers our community with his aggressive behavior. Then it escalated to social media posts in the neighborhood group about dangerous construction that could hurt innocent children. By the time the rumors reached Emma's school, they'd mutated into something truly ugly. "Is it true your dad is building weapons in his garage?" a classmate asked Emma. During lunch, another child pairing their parents wondered aloud if I had anger issues from the war. Emma came home that day with her shoulders slumped and her eyes red. She didn't tell me what happened. I heard it from her teacher, who called to express concern about the bullying situation. Heron's desperation manifested in increasingly bizarre ways. She tried to get the city to condemn our mailbox as a traffic hazard, but the inspector who came out took one look at her complaint and laughed. "Ma'am, this is a mailbox, not a nuclear bunker. Though I got to say it's the nicest mailbox I've ever seen. Is that real? Bronze detailing." She attempted to rally the neighbors against us, going door to door with a petition to have us removed from the neighborhood for creating a hostile environment. Most people refused to sign, but a few, those who owed her favors or feared her wrath, added their names. The petition garnered a grand total of 7 signatures out of 200 homes. But Karen's most desperate move came when she called an emergency HOA meeting, sending out notices that claimed there was a critical safety issue that threatens our entire community. The meeting was scheduled for Friday night at 7, and attendance was strongly encouraged with the implicit threat of fines for absence. The community center was packed that night. Rachel sat beside us, her lawyer face firmly in place, a thick folder of documents in her lap. Emma, despite my suggestion she stay home, insisted on attending. "I'm part of this family. Dad, I'm not hiding the pride I felt was tinged with sadness that my 12-year-old had to be." So brave, Karen stood at the podium in her power suit, the HOA board flanking her like lieutenants. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping with false concern. "I've called this meeting to address the dangerous situation at 1223 Maple Street. Mr. Brooks has installed what can only be described as a vehicular trap disguised as a mailbox. This monstrosity is a threat to every driver in our community." She clicked through a slideshow of photos showing her mangled Lexus, conveniently omitting the security footage that showed her ramming the mailbox at 40 mph. The crowd stirred restlessly. I could see the division. Those who knew the truth, shifting uncomfortably, those who bought into Karen's narrative, nodding along. But then something unexpected happened. Mr. Frederick stood up, his 80-year-old frame shaking slightly but his voice strong. "Karen Thompson, I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, and I've never seen such nonsense. That man's mailbox didn't jump into the street and attack your car. We all saw what happened. You've been destroying his property for months." His outburst opened the floodgates. Mrs. Rodriguez stood next. She fined me $300 for flying my American flag on the wrong bracket. Another voice from the back, $500 for having the wrong shade of white trim. Soon, 15 different people were standing, sharing their stories of Karen's petty tyranny. The meeting was spiraling out of her control, and the look of panic in her eyes was something to behold. Rachel chose that moment to stand. "If I may," she said, her courtroom voice cutting through the chaos. "I'd like to present some relevant information to the board." She opened her folder and began distributing copies of documents. "These are receipts showing HOA funds being used for personal vehicle repairs. 16 instances over 3 years, totaling $45,000. Cert. There's also evidence of fictitious fines being created to cover budget shortfalls caused by this embezzlement. The room erupted. Board members who'd been loyal to Karen began examining the documents with growing alarm. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a purplish hue that couldn't be healthy. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "I am the victim here. That mailbox is a menace. It destroyed my car. Someone in the back, I think it was the teenager who lived next door, shouted back, 'The mailbox didn't do anything. You rammed it like a crazy person. It's all over.'" Social media. And pulled out their phone to show the viral video to anyone who hadn't seen it. The board president, a mild-mannered accountant named Harold, who'd clearly been under Karen's thumb for years, finally found his spine. "Karen, these allegations are serious. We need to table the mailbox discussion and address these financial irregularities." But Karen wasn't done. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "This is all his fault. Everything was fine until he moved here with his child, and his violent military background and his refusal to follow simple social convention." The room went silent at that, everyone turning to look at me. I stood slowly, Emma's hand in mine, and spoke for the first time that evening. "Mrs. Thompson, the only violence in this situation has come from you. Destruction of property, harassment, and now theft. I just wanted to receive my mail in peace, but before anyone could respond, the community center doors opened again, and a man in a dark suit walked in. Aaron's face went from purple to white in seconds. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, holding up a badge, "I'm Inspector Davis from the State HOA Oversight Committee. We need to discuss some serious allegations about missing funds." The appearance of Inspector Davis changed everything in an instant. Karen, who, moments before, had been ranting about my dangerous mailbox, suddenly looked like a cornered animal. The inspector was a tall, serious man who commanded the room without raising his voice. "I apologize for interrupting your meeting," he said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "But we received a formal complaint several weeks ago regarding financial irregularities within this HOA. My preliminary investigation suggests these concerns were well-founded." Rachel caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. She'd been the one to file the complaint, timing it perfectly for maximum impact. The room buzzed with whispers as Inspector Davis set up his laptop and projector. "I'll need to speak with the board privately after this meeting, but I believe the community deserves to know what my investigation has uncovered." What followed was the most beautiful destruction of a petty tyrant I'd ever witnessed. Davis methodically presented his findings. Karen had embezzled over 125,000 over 5 years. The scheme was both simple and audacious. She'd create fake violations, collect fines from residents, but instead of depositing them into the HOA account, she'd pocket the cash and cover the shortfall by billing the HOA for personal expenses, car repairs from her mailbox rampages, weekly spa treatments listed as community beautification, planning sessions, shopping sprees, categorized as neighborhood improvement supplies, even a vacation to Hawaii filed as a Hawaii leadership conference. The evidence was overwhelming, documented in Karen's own handwriting, and authenticated by her signature on countless fraudulent receipts. As each slide appeared on the screen, the crowd's anger grew palpable. "This is preposterous," Karen shrieked, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking completely. "I've dedicated my life to this community. Everything I did was for the betterment of Willowbrook." But her protests rang hollow as Davis presented security footage from various ATMs showing Karen depositing HOA checks into her personal account. The final nail in her coffin came when Davis revealed that several residents who'd supposedly paid fines had actually never been notified of violations. Karen had simply created fake paperwork and pocketed imaginary payments. Mrs. Thompson Davis said calmly, "I've notified local law enforcement. They're waiting outside." "To take you into custody." The room erupted in chaos. Some residents cheered, others sat in shocked silence, and a few of Karen's remaining allies tried to protest through it all. Emma held my hand tightly, watching justice unfold with wide eyes. Karen's final meltdown was spectacular as two police officers entered the room. She pointed at me one last time. "This is all his fault. If he just accepted my dinner invitation, none of this would have happened. Do you hear me? None of this?" The officers approached her carefully. "Professionally, ma'am, we need you to come with us quietly." But Karen was beyond reason. "I am the HOA president. I am the Queen of Willowbrook. You can't do this to me." As they placed her in handcuffs, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face, mascara creating dark rivers on her cheeks. "Why?" she asked, and for a moment she looked genuinely broken. "I just wanted someone to notice me, to care. Why couldn't you just have dinner with me?" I felt an unexpected pang of pity for her. "Mrs. Thompson," I said quietly, "loneliness isn't an excuse to hurt others. You had an entire community here you could have led with kindness instead of fear." She laughed bitterly. Kindness doesn't get you respect. Fear does, control does." Rachel stepped forward then. "No, Karen. Fear gets you. Compliance respect is earned through integrity, something you clearly never understood." As the officers led Karen away, she managed one last proclamation. "My lawyers will destroy all of you. This isn't over." But it was the room sat in stunned silence for a moment after she left. Then Harold, the board president, cleared his throat. "Well, I suppose we need to elect a new HOA president." What happened next surprised me more than anything else that night. One by one, neighbors started nominating me for the position. Daniel's shown more integrity in 6 months than we've seen in years. Mrs. Rodriguez said. Mr. Fredericks nodded enthusiastically. The man stood up to tyranny. "He's got my vote." Even people who'd signed Karen's petition were nodding along, perhaps feeling guilty about their earlier cowardice. I tried to protest. I hadn't moved to Willowbrook to get into politics, but Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mum would want you to help fix things, Dad." That settled it. When the vote was called, it was nearly unanimous. Daniel Brooks, the man who just wanted to receive his mail in peace, was now the HOA president of Willowbrook. Inspector Davis stayed after the meeting to brief the new board on the extent of Karen's fraud. The real number was even higher than initially reported, closer to 150,000 when you included the interest the HOA had paid on loans taken out to cover shortfalls. She was clever, Davis admitted, if she hadn't gotten greedy. With the car repairs, she might have continued for years. Rachel, now officially appointed as the HOA's legal counsel, was already planning recovery efforts. "We'll put liens on her assets. The house alone should cover most of it," as we finally left the community center. Near midnight, Emma looked up at me with a mix of pride and exhaustion. "Dad, we really did it, didn't we? We stopped her." I hugged her close. "We did, sweetheart, though I have a feeling our mailbox did most of the heavy lifting." She laughed, the first real, carefree laugh I'd heard from her in months. "Can we keep it the mailbox? I mean, even though we don't need it for defense anymore?" I looked at Rachel, who'd walked us to our car, and she smiled. "I think that mailbox has earned its place in Willowbrook history. It should definitely stay." As we drove home, I couldn't help but think about how a simple desire to receive mail had led to all this. But maybe that's how it always is with bullies. Someone eventually has to make a stand, even if that stand is made of steel and concrete and weighs 800 liberties 6 months later. Willowbrook felt like an entirely different neighborhood The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over our community like smog had lifted, replaced by something I hadn't expected to find in suburban Texas: genuine neighborly warmth. Karen Thompson was serving 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service after pleading guilty to embezzlement charges. The judge had been lenient, considering her clean record and mental health evaluation that revealed severe depression and personality disorders. But the real punishment was the complete loss of the power and control she'd craved so desperately as the new HOA president. My first act was to eliminate 90% of the ridiculous rules Karen had implemented. Grass could be up to 4 in tall. Mailboxes could be any color. Holiday decorations could stay up as long as people wanted. The response was immediate and joyful. Within weeks, Willowbrook transformed from a beige monument to conformity into a vibrant community full of personality. The infamous Mailbox still stood proudly at 1223 Maple Street, though now it served a different purpose. What had started as a defense against tyranny had become something unexpected: a tourist attraction. People drove from neighboring towns to take selfies with the unstoppable, and Emma had even started a small business selling miniature replicas with proceeds going to the community fund. We'd added a small plaque that read, "Sometimes standing your ground means building stronger foundations." Emma's idea, inspired by something her mother used to say, the Mailbox had also attracted other additions. Someone had yarn-bombed it with a colorful knitted cozy. During the winter, others left small painted rocks with inspirational messages. It had become less of a monument to our conflict with Karen and more of a symbol of community resilience. The biggest change in my life, however, wasn't the HOA presidency or the minor internet fame from the viral video. It was Rachel. What had started as neighborly support had blossomed into something neither of us had expected. She still brought coffee during our morning walks, but now she stayed for breakfast. Emma had taken to calling her mom without prompting, and the first time it happened, Rachel had cried happy tears for 10 minutes. We were taking things slow, respectful of Emma's feelings and my late wife's memory, but for the first time in 3 years, our house felt like a home again. The three of us had even started a new project together, building a community garden where Karen's old parking space used to be. From concrete to cucumbers, Emma had dubbed it, and the name stuck. The annual Willowbrook Festival, established to celebrate our liberation, as Mr. Fredericks dramatically called. It was coming up next week. The highlight would be the Mailbox contest, where residents competed to create the most creative and durable mailboxes. The winner would get their creation displayed next to the Unstoppable for a year. Emma was one of the judges, taking her responsibility very seriously. We need to encourage innovation while maintaining structural integrity, she told the other judges solemnly, sounding like a tiny engineer. The festival would also feature a dunk tank with all proceeds going to charity. I'd volunteered to sit in it for an hour, figuring it was the least I could do as HOA president. Rachel had already pledged $20 to be first in line, but perhaps the most surprising development came in a letter delivered fittingly enough to our indestructible mailbox. It was from Karen, postmarked from the senior care facility where she was completing her community service. Her handwriting was different, less precise, more human. "Dear Mr. Brooks," it began, "I've had a lot of time to think during my service here. Working with people who are truly alone, truly forgotten, has shown me what real loneliness looks like. I realize now that I had a community, I had neighbors, I had opportunities for connection. I chose control instead, and I lost everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to tell me that night. Leadership isn't about power, it's about service. I hope you're serving Willowbrook better than I ever did. Also, please tell Emma that her mailbox design was brilliant. Sincerely, Karen Thompson. I showed the letter to Rachel and Emma over dinner. Emma read it twice, then said something that reminded me once again of her mother's wisdom. I think we should write back, Dad, not because she deserves it, but because we're better than holding grudges. So we did. Emma wrote most of it, telling Karen about the positive changes in Willowbrook, about the festival, about how the mailbox had become a symbol of standing up to bullies everywhere. She even included a photo of one of her miniature replicas. We didn't expect a response, and we didn't need one. The act of forgiveness was for us, not for Karen. As I walked out to mail the letter, I paused at our famous mailbox. The scratch from Karen's Lexus was still there, a small scar on otherwise pristine black paint. I'd thought about fixing it a dozen times, but Emma had asked me to leave it. Battle scars tell stories, Dad, she'd said, standing there in the Texas twilight with the sounds of our happy neighborhood around me, kids playing, neighbors chatting, dogs barking. I realized she was right. Our scars, our struggles, our stands against injustice, they all tell stories, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, those stories end with new beginnings, stronger communities, and mailboxes that refuse to fall. If you ever find yourself in Willowbrook, stop by and see our famous mailbox, take a selfie, leave a painted rock, maybe even check if there's mail to be delivered. Just whatever you do, please don't try to hit it with your car. Trust me on that one.